And Jesus promises us very specifically that he will, that it won't be sunshine and rainbows. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. And there's going to be work involved in the Christian faith, but he provides the strength to endure the whole time.
Welcome back to the Finding Something Real podcast. This is your host, Janell Wood, and you are listening in for season 7, where we start off most months with a different young woman sharing her faith story and allowing her the space to ask some tough questions about God and Christianity. We've been having conversations with Noelle, talking through a lot of her faith questions. And my notes say that she's not here for this recording, but that would be a lie. Because she surprised me and showed up, and I'm so grateful. Noelle, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
How are you doing? I know you've got a new schedule and you thought you were going to have class right now. So how are those
Yeah,
things going?
it's been going really good. I just happened to get home in time today, so worked out really good. I'm loving my new classes. They're so amazing. Western is a great school.
Yeah, you were telling me last time we were here, you're taking one about comics. Is that the one that you love right now, or which one do you love the most?
Ooh, all of them are really, really cool. I'm taking a women and literature in the 19th century class, which is really, really cool. We're learning about like the first published poets and writers that were women, and just like, I don't know, hardships they've faced in life. And then, yeah, my queer comics class. I just had the first class today because the the professor was sick for a little bit, but we just started today, and it's gonna be very, very exciting. It's something I have like no knowledge about, so I'm like really, really excited to learn it all.
Thank you for coming back, Noelle. It's always a joy to have people here. And also, I didn't know that you were going to be here. And last minute, like literally 15 minutes ago, I was texting. I actually was complaining on social media, not complaining, but like praising God that despite a lot of tech issues with my last recording today, that God showed up and it was awesome. And this other person who has been on this podcast before previously as well, she reached out to me and said, it's always like that with your stories, Janell. And I said, hey, if you're not in dance class like you told me you would, you want to show up and be my co-host today? And she showed up. Bless her heart. Signe, welcome back to the podcast.
Well, thank you. Well, luckily I'm in 1 more hour ahead, I think, right now, because we already changed back to summertime, so time fit anyways.
Yeah. Well, and you're in Denmark. So what is it, like 9 o'clock over there?
Almost 10 is.
Okay. Yeah. I just, you've met today's guest before. And when I told you that he was going to be on the podcast and you were going to miss it, you said, make sure you say hi to him for me. And I just thought that was really sweet. And I just love that you came back. Because even though I know he gave you some fun things to think about, sometimes it can be challenging. In fact, that was one of the things that Noelle and I talked about briefly at the end of our last conversation. I asked her, "Do you remember this, Noelle?" I was like, "Hey, how are things really going?" And she's like, "These conversations are a little challenging. They're a little, they're not really super fun." Noelle, you talked about how even though you secretly and not so secretly anymore think that maybe a lot of Christians or most of them are haters, you came on this podcast anyway, and I wanted to share a moment from that first episode that we recorded together about that. So here we go.
I've really been trying to do some deep inner kind of thinking about my like my own personal beliefs on these things, and not just what the internet's telling me or what what I'm hearing about. I want to know like what I actually think. And my kind of thinking on it is like we just need to love everyone. Like that is the very bottom line, is that we just need to love and accept everyone. Um and treat each other well, treat each other with love and respect. Just because, someone is different or like weird to you, doesn't mean that they're bad. And we can still love them. Um, and it upsets me, like, this idea of like hierarchological stuff. That word. Yeah. Yeah, and just the sense of superiority of certain people, certain groups, um, and the inequity that a lot of people face, and the kind of um, apathy that is shown towards it, and like not a whole lot of effort gets put in, I feel like, to kind of help the people. The people. Yeah. So yeah, just love and acceptance and happiness and joy. And that'll bring us together. I don't see why we need to hate.
I asked you to identify anything that you found that resonated with you on a list of different things, and you said someone who doesn't believe in God or seriously doubts that He exists, someone who wonders how science and faith can coexist, someone who grew up in church but has questions or concerns about faith, someone who likes to experiment with tarot cards or crystals or astrology in general, someone who thinks most Christians are probably haters. We'll have to talk about that one. But she said, I really dislike, this is the one thing that you pointed out, I really dislike the hatred toward the LGBTQ plus community from many Christians who claim they spread love.
Yeah,
Tell me
that
about that.
is like my biggest big number one reason for kind of not loving the Christian church.
Noelle, you asked about the exclusivity of Christianity, even though you yourself aren't sure there is a God. What about other religions? And this is something that we talked a bit about in different conversations, including the talk that we had with Dr. Doug Groothuis and Detective J. Warner Wallace. You definitely want to go back, if you're listening or watching this, and listen to those episodes if you haven't already. But stories are very powerful, and today's guest has one that I believe is compelling. In fact, in preparation for this conversation, I went and watched a YouTube video, and I learned all these things about his story that even though he's been on the podcast like 3 times now, I'd never really heard before about his personal story. So I'm excited to hear this today. I am honored to have him on the podcast again. I'm looking forward to introducing him here. But before I do that, I just wanted to pause and say something that I hope you, as the listener or watcher, find valuable. And in my notes, it says I'm bummed that Noelle can't be here, but she's totally here, which is so cool. Today's guest, the reason I was so bummed, Noelle, is because today's guest is somebody who treats people with incredible dignity and kindness. And every time he's come on, it's not his intellect, arguments, or story that's been the most memorable thing to me. It's always been the way he's treated my different co-hosts who have been on this program with different worldviews. In fact, Signe from Denmark, who's here as well, again, talking about you in the third person because it's in my notes that were prepared last night. You co-hosted a number of episodes with me last season. You met him, you read his books. You wanted to come back today and wanted to be sure that he knew that you were sorry to miss him. And not to get on too big of a soapbox right now, but since I'm already here, Maya Angelou famously said, I've learned that people will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel. I think that's true of the things Noelle has shared on the podcast about the way that she felt by certain Christian groups. And also, I think it's true of the way that Abdu has shown up here. And I don't think any of my co-hosts who've had the privilege of talking with today's guest, Abdu Murray, will forget how talking with him made them feel as fellow human beings. His ministry, Embrace the Truth, strives to answer people, not questions. Questions don't need answers, he says. People need answers. Abdu Murray offers the credibility of the gospel message as a speaker and writer with Embrace the Truth. He has authored several books, including Saving Truth, Grand Central Question, Apocalypse Later, and the book More Than a White Man's Religion. For most of his life, Abdu was a proud Muslim until a 9-year historical, philosophical, theological, and scientific investigation pointed him to the Christian faith. Welcome back to the Finding Something Real podcast, Abdu.
Well, Janelle, it's what a pleasure and an honor. I always try my best whenever I see an invitation from you to join you on the podcast, to say yes, if all humanly possible, as soon as humanly possible. I've said it before in many different spheres. I really appreciate the way in which your podcast is relatively unique amongst the ones that I've been on, certainly, and the ones I've watched, because you invite people to be very, very authentic and real and raw, without being offensive. I think that you carry that ethos and that desire. None of us is perfect. I'm certain I've been unintentionally, or maybe even, given my, fallenness, intentionally abrasive at times, and try not to be as much as possible. But your guests have always been incredibly gracious to me. So I delight in the invitation. So thank you for it.
Well, I'm really glad that you're back. Thank you for being here. I know I had more to read, but I had my pages turned around, so I hope it's all right. You live in Michigan with your wife and your 3 kids. Are they still at home? Are your children still at home?
So my oldest is a second year, like Noelle, in university, and loving it, finishing it up, really enjoying things. He's actually in the marching band at Michigan State University, and loves being part of the Big Ten marching band, even though the Big Ten football team hasn't been so great the past couple of years. But he still loves being a part of the marching band. My oldest is graduating this year, figuring out and picking the college she wants to go to. And my youngest is, my middle is a girl, and she's super excited about college and finishing up her senior year. And my youngest is also a daughter of mine, and she is a volleyball player and good student and a great volleyball player, and excited about her future as well. And so they're two thirds of them are home, soon to be 1/3, and it's going to be really hard for me to be in a house with 2 of my kiddos gone, and my wife and I will be struggling with that, but also delighting in their progress, because it's really a pleasure to see them shine the way they are, and to see their wings spread and explore stuff and really just grow as people. It's been truly a pleasure. So it softens the blow of missing them.
Yeah. Yeah, Noelle, I've had some conversations with your mom, and I know it's hard to go into that transition, because I know now you and your brother are going to be gone. So, um, Abdu, when I introduced you, I said some nice things, but that's because it matters. And I think that sometimes people have this wrong perception that you need to have all the answers to talk with people about their faith questions. But really, I believe that if you prioritize answers ahead of seeing people, you miss the whole point. You start with loving people, and that love will propel you into seeking answers. Would you agree with that, or has that been your experience? What would you say? Does love come first?
Yeah, well, I think, it's interesting you asked that question that way at the tail end there, because if as I follow Jesus, he claims 2 things about himself. He claims to be the truth. He says that in John 8, and he says that in John 14, and amongst other places, that he claims to be the truth. If that's true, he also claims to be love. And in 1 John chapter 4 and other places in the Bible, you see that God is love. So if he is both those things, if he is both truth and love, and I give one of those things without the other, then I've given neither.
Mm.
If I've explored one of those things without the other, then I've explored neither. So in order to fully understand, I think, what love can be, there's this truth that undergirds it. If you're sharing truth or exploring truth with someone, but not in a spirit of love of that person or a love of the truth, then you're not really doing an authentic exploration. Conversely, if you're exploring love, and there's no undergirding of truth, then you're not really exploring love in a way that has a root as these things as well. So I think having answers, and giving them in a spirit of either A, trying to impress people, or B, trying to win an argument, you lose the person, and you're not being truthful in your authenticity, because you're not loving the person you're speaking to. And I don't mean in a romantic or a familial way, just appreciating them as in a spirit of love, as someone who is intrinsically and I think objectively made in the image of God, which means that I don't give that value to them. They have been given that value in an objective sense by the creator of everything. So I have no right to denigrate, insult, or make someone feel bad based on that view. based on my views, I should say. Um, so I think it's both really. But I'll tell you what, you come to somebody and you claim to have answers, and you don't come from a spirit of engaging someone as a person of value, then they don't really care what you have to say. You're going to get in a great argument, but you're not going to get in a good discussion. And you're not going to learn some things. I think some of the best times I've ever had something where I've learned something is where I have assumed the other person is either smarter than me, which is usually the case, or that the person knows something about something that I don't know about, which is always the case. You, Janell, Noelle, Signe, that will always have something more to offer than I do, because you have an experience in life that I don't. And so I'll learn something from you, no matter how much years I have on you or how much time I've spent exploring these things. You come with that attitude, I think you're going to have a real conversation, not just a back and forth. Now we might disagree and maybe even disagree sharply on some stuff, but the best sharp disagreements, which forge us and cause us to really come to an understanding of the way reality actually is best done when it's done in a spirit that you can disagree without being disagreeable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would love for Noelle to respond to that. And then I'd love to ask you about your story, and then let Signe or Noelle ask you whatever they want.
All right.
And Signe, you can respond as well if you'd like.
I like the way you say, like, I don't know, you have to talk to the person. You can't just, like, spew facts at them. And yeah, love is so important. And just, like, yeah, treating people nicely. And I think, like, a really good strategy of argument is talking with people that you don't agree with, or you've never heard of anything that they're talking about. I think it's a way to learn a lot. And yeah, like personally, I find myself learning the most when I think I'm right, and then I realize how wrong I am.
Mm.
Um, and I go, oh yeah, wow, that was dumb. So yeah, just like awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome. Love it.
Great.
Any thoughts, Signe?
I think it's important to treat people nicely because it gives you a lot of respect. Like, there's no way you can only have so much respect for people who treat others nicely and like listen truly, and I think that's the only way to, I don't know. Yeah, keep going.
Abdu, I was listening to a talk you gave about your book, Grand Central Station. Is that right? No, Grand Central Question, not
Yeah.
Grand Central Station. When I was watching it, it was really compelling because you shared your story of the questions you asked, and also about, and certainly it's an interesting segue from what we were just talking about, how you were insatiable towards searching for truth, but also insatiable in your desire to share your Muslim or faith, right,
Mm-hmm.
with other people. And
Yeah.
so I would love for you to share about who you were growing up. I'd love for you to share what you shared in that talk, because it was so interesting. And I did not know those things about you, even though you've been on the podcast before. So it
Okay.
was very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, some of the things funny because they give you a certain amount of time sometimes to tell your story. So some things I leave out, some things I put in. So I never know exactly what someone's heard in terms of the full story. I won't give the full story because that's extremely piggish on the time we have. So I won't do that. But so raised in a Muslim home, very serious about it. Raised in the United States, believing that Islam was, was the stuff. It was true, and people should believe it. And here's 10 reasons why it's great to believe it. But also, I grew up, as most Muslims are, trained in how to actually respond to Christian claims. Now, I was able to respond to multiple different worldview claims, but in the West, a lot of Muslims are trained in their homes informally, sometimes formally, but usually informally, to be able to respond to Christian claims in specific. Because a big fear amongst immigrant Muslims is not assimilation into American society in terms of obeying the laws and understanding the sort of American context and the individualism that the West is noted for, but losing your authenticity, so to speak, losing your ethnic or your religious authenticity becomes something you really worry about. And so, because we're part of an honor and shame culture, the Easterners and Middle Easterners are part of an honor and shame culture, which basically means that the way in which we actually view morality and view morality as socially enforced is different than the West. In the West, we're more of an innocence and guilt culture, which is highly individualistic. It's I did it my way, and it's my life, and it's my decisions, and all that. And that's got its beauty and its power because it allows for pioneering, it allows for breakthroughs of different kinds. But it's got a shadow side. Western individualism has a shadow side, and that shadow side is that you don't really think about how your actions and your life choices affect the people around you. In the East, we have an honor and shame system, which enforces morality not in an individualistic way, but in a collective way. So that what you do is you strive to bring honor to your family and to your culture and to your community, and you try to avoid shame. Which means that, and there's a beautiful side to that. And the beautiful side to that is that you actually consider how your actions affect other people around you. But it's got its own shadow side. And its shadow side is that you don't necessarily pursue truth. What you pursue is that which brings honor. And sometimes what your culture dictates that brings honor might be false. And what your culture dictates will bring shame might be true. And so you follow that which is false because it brings honor, and you embrace that which is true. You avoid that which is true because it might bring shame. Not always, but sometimes. And that includes worldviews. And that was a big part of my thinking, is that I was a Muslim. I gave myself a bunch of reasons why I should be a Muslim. And I didn't want to assimilate too much religiously because I thought that would bring shame to not only myself, but family and culture and all these things. So I embarked on this journey to try to, I was an equal opportunity faith knocker-outer, though, by the way. It wasn't just Christians I was trying to turn away from their faith. If there was an atheist, an agnostic, a Buddhist, a Hindu, a Jew, whatever it was, if they didn't agree with me in terms of Islam or whatever, at some point in the conversation, and it was conversational. I wasn't like, standing on the street corner thumping my Quran at people or anything like that. I was just engaging in conversation. I would ultimately ask a person, why are you a Christian? Or, whatever you were. And more often than not, I'm a child of the 80s. I was born in the 70s, but I remember the 80s. More often than not, people would say they were a Christian because it was fashionable to say you were a Christian back then, even if you didn't really mean it. Now that's over. People don't do that anymore. But back then they did. So they'd say, oh, I'm a Christian because I go to church on Christmas and Easter. So I'm if I go to a Presbyterian church, I guess I'm a Presbyterian, that kind of thing. And I would say back to them, are you telling me that you trust the eternal destiny of your soul to a worldview that someone else thought through? Have you thought through it at all? And they'd say, no, it's just tradition. I'm like, well, hold on a second. No, you can think through these things. And then I'd say something, that I thought was clever. I'd say stuff like, well, I thought it through for you. Here's 5 reasons why you're wrong and I'm right. And along the way, what was really fascinating was there were Christians who actually knew what they were talking about. They didn't just believe it because it was tradition. They believed it because it was true, or at least they had come to that conclusion that it is true after a lot of study into the thing. And I found those people to be terribly annoying because, I like to have conversations, but, I like to be right like most people. And so I worked up quite a bit of study across different religious systems in order to find ammunition against those religious systems, including and especially the Christian faith. Well, to make a long story just a little longer, what started me to really consider the Christian faith in terms of its authenticity and my own lack of authenticity in terms of why I believed things, I was reading a Bible to find contradictions in it, hopeless contradictions, because these 2 Baptist guys were coming door to door at the apartment complex at the University of Michigan where I was going to school. And they came in my house and we invited them in and we talked for hours and hours. And I made these guys very uncomfortable for hours at a time but they were willing to keep coming back. And they didn't do it in a, we're keeping score. If we win Abdu, then we get to go and brag to the people back at the church kind of thing. They weren't doing that. They really cared about me. They wanted me in heaven, and I wanted them in God's paradise. But I also wanted them to see that the Bible was changed and horribly corrupt, and you can't believe it. So I'm reading this Bible, and I come across Luke chapter 3, verses 7 and following. And in those chapters, people are coming to John the Baptist to be baptized. And he tells them, these Jewish people, he says, who told you to flee from the wrath to come? In other words, who told you to flee from God's judgment for your sins? And then he says something remarkable. He says, do not even begin to think to yourself, you have Abraham as your father. In other words, as if your heritage and your genetic makeup will somehow save you. For I tell you, he says, God can raise up children of Abraham from the stones. In other words, your tradition is not what saves you. It's not important. What is important is truth. And this convicted me. And the reason it convicted me was because I was telling Christians, and anybody really, that tradition was not a good enough reason to believe anything by itself. Now, if your tradition is true, great. But if it's false, then reject it. And I was saying, Christians do this, but me as a Muslim, I don't do that. And then I was suddenly convicted by John the Baptist's words. I do the same exact thing. That's what I was doing. And it was hypocritical of me to ask Christians to forego their tradition or risk foregoing their tradition for the sake of truth if I wasn't willing to do the same thing. So that began the 9-year journey into the Christian faith and into other faiths, by the way, as well, to see if they had any historical credibility, any theological cohesion, if it made all kind of sense, the scientific underpinnings, these kind of things. And what I began to see was the Christian faith actually spoke to me on multiple levels, intellectually, when it came to history, science, theology, philosophy. But it also spoke to me in terms of the philosophy that reached my mind and my heart at the same time. So you guys hear the phrase all the time in the media, Allahu Akbar. You hear Muslims say, Allahu Akbar. And then you see it on television, and usually they fire something up in the air and something bad happens and things explode. This is unfortunate, actually, because most Muslims are not like that. Most Muslims say that phrase, not as a battle cry for some terrible thing they're going to do, but as a prayer and a praise in daily life. It means God is greater. So I would say it, and a lot of the peace-loving Muslims I knew would say it, God is greater, because they would say it as a praise. They'd walk into a house and they'd say, oh my goodness, God is so great. Look at the blessing of this house you have. Or they get bad news. Someone would pass away that they loved, or they got a bad medical report, whatever it was. And they'd say, Allahu Akbar, God is greater than my circumstances. So God's greatness was the central idea of Islam. Every other thing about Islam is centered on the idea that God is the incomparably great being. Well, along the course of my journey, I thought to myself, if there is a God, and I came to believe for a lot of reasons that there is, if there was a God, he would by definition have to be the greatest possible being. And the greatest possible being, Allahu Akbar, the greatest, God is greater. The greatest possible being would have to express the greatest possible ethic in the greatest possible way. Otherwise, he would be just like you and me, or even less than you and I. So if he expresses the greatest possible ethic, which is love, in the greatest possible way, what is the greatest way to express love? Well, it's self-sacrifice. Everyone knows you can do a lot of things to impress a person, but ultimately your selfishness creeps in even to your selflessness. You try to be impressive. You try to be the Romeo to the Juliet or whatever it is, and there's a little bit of you in there, quite a bit, until you love someone to the point where you're willing to do something that hurts you but helps them. As a parent, as a husband, as a brother, as a friend, as a son, I know what that's like, and I know you guys know true love is a self-sacrificial thing. And then I realized something. It's the Christian faith, and I believe uniquely the Christian faith, that tells us of the greatest possible being, God, expressing the greatest possible ethic, which is love, in the greatest possible way, which is self-sacrifice. That's what the cross is all about. And he didn't just die and stay dead. He rose again in victory over that death so that we could have that life as well. And when I realized that all that I was searching for in Islam, and I was hoping to be true there and anywhere else, I found to be uniquely true in the Christian faith in a way that touched the mind and the heart. And so I gave my life to him in the year 2000, and been pursuing how to better serve him and how to share this news that has brought me pain, but also an incomparable joy, even despite that pain. Um, uh, it's been so worth it. It's been so worth it. And 24 years now. Come June, it'll be 24 years, almost a quarter century that I've been serving him, and hopefully serving others by presenting a credible presentation of that.
Thank you for sharing that. Girls, what do you think? How do you want to respond to Abdu's story? And do you have any questions that come from that?
Well, I've heard the story before, and I still find it interesting. But I really want to know what Noelle thinks, because I have my own things that I'm thinking about, but I'm also like partly thinking about what we talked about, before. So I kind of want to know like what someone else would think of this.
I'm wondering, like, what your family thinks about your decision and if they're supportive or not.
Yeah. So I won't give a ton of detail, only because it's not only my story, it's also theirs. And being Middle Easterners, it's a big thing to be private when it comes to this stuff. But I will say this: they did not throw a party, and it was we had our rough spots. I've been blessed with an incredibly good, close family who loves me deeply, and I love them deeply. There is still tension over these issues, and they're absent some heart change, there always will be. But what we have learned to do and is to live in the differences with mutual respect and love for each other because of who we are, who we always have been to each other. We see each other as gifts, not to be taken for granted. And I think what we've done, and my Christian faith informs me that I am not supposed to equate a person with their ideas. Is that the person is valuable no matter what it is they think, say, do, or believe about themselves or about the world around them. Which means that they have an inherent value, irrespective of anything that they. Now they can. I believe in evil. I believe people can be evil. I believe that people can be act nobly and all that stuff. But I think in our conversations and in our relationship, we've been able to see that we can disagree fairly strongly on these things, while divorcing the ideas we don't agree with the people we love deeply. And so I'm very, very grateful for that. Has it been tough? Yeah, for all of us, not just me, for all of us. And it's gone into the wider community, into the Muslim community, into my ethnic community. It's bled over into that too sometimes, but we've managed, and it did take some time. I'm not going to say it was instantaneous, that everything was fine immediately. So yeah, it's gone. It's gone as well. It's gone better than I'd hoped. Let's put it that way.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really liked what you said about kind of authenticity within kind of the East. And it's actually really relevant to a class I'm taking right now called Gender and Sexuality in South Asia. And yeah, a big thing was that the East didn't want to be like the West in kind of most of the capacities. And so there's kind of a rejection of anything that they're willing to give. So I think that's really cool to like bring in.
Yeah, so thanks. It's fascinating you say that, because obviously there's a real history of this stuff, right? I mean, to deny that is to just turn a blind eye to history and to try to. I think defensiveness is never never an attractive trait in people who are trying to move forward with each other. However, having said that, I think that we have to own that. But in my most recent book, More Than a White Man's Religion, I actually talk about right now, when you look around the world, and I'm speaking from a Christian perspective, because I think that Christianity was a tool by which colonizers baptized or some other baptized some evil. But I don't think it's actually justifiable in the pages of Scripture to do that. I think it was abused in that way. Now, it's interesting when you look around the world right now, population-wise, and this is post-colonialization. Christianity as a system of belief, where people are really embracing it around the world, is actually growing in the global South, in Asia, and in Africa. So, in other words, in the non-white areas, Christianity is actually growing by leaps and bounds in those areas post-colonialization. And I've heard people say, well, that's because they still live with the colonized mindset. To which my response is that I actually find that a little racist when people say that, because it's like they can't rise above it, or these kind of things. Is they'll be the first ones to tell you. You ask any Christian in Nigeria, you ask any Christian in Uganda, you ask Christians in South America, why did you become a believer? Why did you become a Christian? And it's not because the colonizers forced it on me. It's not because the official religion is the Catholic Church or the Church of England. It's because they encountered Christians, whether missionaries or otherwise, who displayed something in their life that really changed their minds. And it wasn't plied with food or applied with international aid efforts. Although those things did help, of course. So yes, I have a history of that. And I come from the Middle East, right? So my background is Middle Eastern, and given what's going on right now in the Middle East, there's a lot of talk about colonization and imperialism and these kind of things. And these are real conversations we need to be having. So I think that there is a government area here and an issue there, but I think that there's also some. You ask a lot of Indians, by the way. Of course, India was a British colony, and when they gained their independence from Britain, that was a good thing. It was a wonderful thing. It was a much needed thing. It was a far too long in coming thing. But ask any Indian who lives there what they're grateful for, and they'll say, we're really grateful for the British importation of democracy. We're really grateful for the British road system and various things that aren't just small but big. So you can always redeem good out of something that's evil or bad or harmful. I'm not saying that justifies in any way, shape, or form. No, it does not. But what I find interesting is that's kind of what the Christian message is taking that which was meant for evil, and then God can turn it around for good in a way that we didn't expect. He doesn't cause the evil, he doesn't condone the evil, but he does use the situation for a greater good. You see this repeatedly throughout the Bible. In fact, you see it repeatedly throughout the Bible when God uses colonizers and imperialists to actually bring about a good for the sake of the oppressed over and over again. And it's shocking the way it happens, which is why you see, I think, a surge of the Christian message in places that have been colonized, not because of colonization, but despite colonization, they're actually coming to faith. So this is a real conversation we need to be having. But I think that if we throw the Christian message out as part of the ingredients that created colonization, I think we're actually throwing out the cure for the very thing that we are blaming on. So that's just my opinion. But anyway, I wrote a book about it. I'm happy to send you a copy, by the way, for free if you'd like.
I would love one. And when Janelle was listing off like some of your works, that was the one that I was like, I should look that up, because it's just like so relevant to my life right now. And I care very deeply about it. And I do like what you said about how, people find Christianity despite colonization rather than, it being a product of that. Oh goodness, I was gonna say something else. Maybe not. Anyway.
Abdu, question for you. Was there something lacking in your life when you came to Christianity? Did you feel like, the Islamic faith isn't working for me, I'm hungry for something else? Or was it truly just this quest for truth? And why are you a Christian today?
Getting all deep and stuff. No. So I'm going to answer maybe in a surprising way, because a lot of folks answer this question in a, yes, Christianity fulfilled this hole I'd always been aching for in my life. And I think that is largely true for most people who become Christians. And it's funny, mine is more of a retrospective. Like, I noticed the hole after it was filled.
Mm.
There's this scene. It's funny. There's this scene in a movie from the '80s called Excalibur, and it's the story of King Arthur, and the quest for the mystical sword. And at some point, they're searching for the Holy Grail, and it's part of the Arthur legend. And Arthur is dying, and the land is dying with him. And then one of the knights finds the Grail and dips it into the water, the holy water, and he drinks from it. And Arthur suddenly revives, and he says, "I didn't know how empty my soul was until it was filled." And I sort of feel that way. Like, I didn't know how empty my soul was until it was filled. But I was very happy being a Muslim. I didn't want to become a Christian. I kind of didn't want to become a Christian when I became a Christian. I was sort of like, um, I didn't feel intellectually honest unless I became one. Partly was I had intellectually assented to the Christian faith in terms of its history, its reliability, all these things, before I actually embraced it. In fact, we're called Embrace the Truth as a ministry because there is a difference between intellectually assenting to something and embracing that thing. Yeah, intellectual assent. I mean, I can intellectually assent that gravity works, that the laws of motion are real. But did that really? What does it mean to embrace those things? When it comes to the Christian faith, I could intellectually assent to the resurrection of Jesus. I could intellectually assent to the reliability of the Bible or whatever. But there's a far cry from intellectually assenting to it and embracing it. So I intellectually assented quite a while before I fully spiritually embraced the Christian faith. What I later discovered, though, was that the hole I was looking for, and I was looking for this idea of God being great, right? So I wanted to know if there was a God who exists, but I also wanted to know if that God exists, he has to fit a certain mold. I don't mean like a preconceived notion that I have in my mind, like he's got to fit my version of God. That's not what I meant. What I meant was, as a matter of definition, if there is a supreme being, well, he's got to be a being who is supreme. I mean, he can't lack. He's got to be perfect. There can't be a sudden dearth of moral goodness in him. There's got to be power, all kind of stuff. So remember, God is greater. And so I was looking for that. I thought I had seen it in Islam. But during the course of my intellectual journey, I began to see, I don't know if it's there. I don't know if it's anywhere. And then I found it. And so there was a sense of satisfaction that which I was hoping to be true actually was true. And it wasn't that I fulfilled a confirmation bias because I was looking to see, is this even true at all? But like I said, I came to the Christian faith at that moment. In fact, I'll share this. When I gave my life to Jesus, when I said, I confess that he is that he is Lord and that God raised him from the dead, I was nauseous. I actually made that confession of faith, and I was physically nauseous because I realized something. Boy, now I've done it. Now that's that. I mean, because in Islam, for example, the unforgivable sin is what's called shirk. Shirk is a Arabic word which means partnership or association. And when you associate partners or other beings to be equal with God, well, then that's the sin you can't be forgiven of. Well, I had just confessed that the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are one, and that Jesus is not only the Son of God, but God the Son incarnate. And so I believe in one God, in three persons, and Muslims consider that blasphemy. So I'm like, boy, can I ever go back now? So that initial sort of sense of what's going to happen now? What happens now? Like, who do I tell when I tell them what's going to go on? Who am I? I mean, honestly, there was a question of who I was. I liked being a Muslim. I had an identity firmly rooted in being sort of exotic. When I grew up in the area I grew up in, there was some diversity, but not a lot. We were sort of the dollop of olive oil in the pot of rice. So I liked being a standout. I liked being the kind of guy who would convince Christians that they were wrong. I liked being the guy who other Muslims would go to with questions. I liked my cultural identity. The good news is I didn't have to lose all of that. I could still stay Eastern. I could still stay Middle Eastern. In fact, let me suggest this. I became more Middle Eastern in one sense because my Lord and Savior is not a white Roman imperialist emperor. He is the Jewish peasant who had olive skin like me, probably even a little darker, ate the same kind of foods I eat now, spoke a language very similar with all the guttural ha and ra that I speak now. You know, he's ethnically diverse from me. So I didn't have to lose that, but I did sense that idea of loss of identity in one sense. But I got to tell you, it was immediately replaced. In one sense, it was immediately replaced. In another sense, it was developed over time. The immediate replacement was that I finally rediscovered my true identity. I didn't get a new one necessarily. I mean, you become a new creation in Christ. That's what the Bible teaches. But I sort of realized what I was originally meant for and who I was originally meant for. And so it wasn't just this sort of definition that was based on ethnicity or religion. It was based on being made in God's image and then being fully redeemed. So nausea was replaced by joy.
Signe, do you have any thoughts on that?
I do, yeah. I really like what you're saying. You know, I've had similar experiences. I didn't need God at all. I feel like I had a nice life, you know. My mom's actually been commenting on this. We've had a lot of like arguments and discussions about this because no one in my family is religious at all. They're all atheists and very like they don't want that at all. But I've been a lot more distant to my mom, especially because she doesn't understand it. And um all this like Christianity and Jesus and God has been a lot on my mind, and it's been worrying me a lot. And I think, you know, it's to change like such a big part of your life is hard. So it also like emotionally takes a lot of energy for you. And you know, it does. And so she's been like, why would you even go through that if it's hard? You know, isn't it supposed to be like a good thing? If you're doing it, why would you do it if it's hard? I don't see the point in that. And I guess it was what was it I came back to? You know, I think it was the part that, you know, I'm not doing this because I necessarily want to, but because I know, like, I can't deny that it's true, you know? I don't, the more I deny it, the more I feel like a fool, you know? Because I've seen,
That's me.
I, like, when I came to America and I found out that I was going to live with, like, a Christian family, I was like, I'm just gonna like whenever they talk about Jesus and stuff, I'm just gonna not listen, you know? Just mind my own business, you know? But it's really my own curiosity. Like you can't force it on people. When I got curious, you know, the more you talk and the more like I felt it, I just like and the more I learned that like I couldn't deny it. And I was in this place like I'm gonna have to change, and I'm not living in a culture where it fits. Like people don't like understand, so it's hard to change that. But you know, is it worth it? It is, and it's hard. But I don't feel like the change isn't worth it. You know, but it wasn't like you know you talked about you not wanting that. It's a hole. I don't feel like I had a hole, but I do feel like something's been filled out now that wasn't there before. But it wasn't like there was a hole, you know, because I was perfectly happy, and in some ways I'm not. I mean, right now it's not because I'm not completely there, but I feel like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense at all.
Perfect.
That was
Actually,
great.
Perfect sense. Yeah.
I to follow up on that, and I hope this is a good segue because I'd love for Abdu for you to respond to what Signe just said. But just earlier today, I got to be a fly on the wall for a conversation. I didn't get to participate in it as much as I would have liked, but it was all right. And it was so beautiful, actually. My co-host and the guest were having a beautiful conversation, and the guest was asking my co-host, a different co-host, like, why haven't you given your life to the Lord yet? And it's not because she hasn't intellectually ascended. It's because for different reasons, but she said one of them is she's afraid of what would happen in her life, what would change. And then she was afraid of the work it would require to get there. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that, and also the question of, you've been in Signe's shoes, you've been in, the girl that I just mentioned shoes. How do you reach out and touch him? Where do you go from there?
Mm. Let me, boy, this is such an important question. There is no, so there's a quote by G.K. Chesterton I think I find so powerful. And he says that it's not that the Christian faith has been tried and found wanting. It's that it's been tried and found difficult
Mm.
and then left alone. And that's never a good reason to do anything, to leave anything behind is because it's difficult. Intellectually, logically speaking, calculus is hard. Does that mean we shouldn't do it? These things can be really, really tough. Marriage is not always sunshine and rainbows, and it can be gut wrenching and tough, but it's always worth it. The Christian faith is, and Jesus promises us very specifically that he will, that it won't be sunshine and rainbows. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard. And there's going to be work involved in the Christian faith, but he provides the strength to endure the whole time. So when your mom asks, why would you do it if it's this hard? This is not, it's not supposed to be easy. No worldview is actually really easy. I don't think anybody would tell you that, but the Christian faith doesn't promise you that it will be. So Jesus never breaks a promise. When he says it's going to be hard, he never breaks a promise. In fact, if it was easy, that might have been a broken promise. So, but it's very difficult, and he predicted that it would be. How I would say it is that I have never felt more fulfilled and happy. More fulfilled and close to God than when I have been, in one sense, the least happy about it. I don't know if that makes any sense in one way, but I remember specifically praying at one point when it was very tough to be a Christian, very tough. A time when I was like, why isn't this easier? Why aren't you showing up in a miraculous way to change the circumstances or change hearts or whatever? Why aren't you doing that? Why are you late? I would ask God these questions, or why are you not even late? Why are you just completely absent from the situation? And during those prayers, I got to tell you, at the end, with the freedom I had to be able to say those things, I couldn't say that in Islam. I could not say that. It's not allowed. But you read the Psalms. You want to read a psalm where someone is agonizingly crying out to God, where are you? What are you waiting for? And then someone who comes at the end of that same psalm to see, but God has been gracious to me even in the midst of all this. Read Psalm 13. Read Psalm 13, and you'll see you get to be raw and honest and real with God. David wrote that at a time when it was the worst to follow the truth. It was the worst. And he wrote that, and he found God's graciousness, but the freedom to basically almost like scream at them, like, what the heck? Why is this way? I've done that. And at the end of it, I have found fulfillment, not happiness. I found fulfillment. And you don't always get the two don't always happen at the same time. Sometimes they do, and that's great. Oh my goodness, the bliss. It is something. It really is something. But I would be lying to you if I said that the goal of the Christian life on this side of heaven is happiness. It's not. It's actually knowledge of God, which is fulfilling. And those two things aren't the same. Fulfillment and happiness are not the same. I think the world tells us that happiness is your goal. Do what makes you happy. Well, that changes like a lot. And circumstances can make happiness almost impossible. But joy is different. Joy endures because I know whose I am. I know where I have an anchor when the waves get rough. I know that. Signe, I know everything you described, you and me, except for the fact that you're in Denmark and a woman and blonde, we're very similar. Because I didn't grow up in a context that was okay with this. I had no concept of the idea of grace, unmerited grace, that I don't have to earn anything and do anything, and that happiness is not the ultimate goal. I didn't have a context for that, but then I did in terms of the Christian faith. And so I find myself like a salmon swimming upstream. But you know what swims downstream? Dead things. Dead things flow go with the flow. Live things, things that get strong, flow upstream. And I'm not a particularly strong person. I'm not a particularly brave person. But I found the strength to swim upstream in the middle of all that, not because of a human strength, but because of, I would like to say, a divine strength that gave me something I didn't otherwise have. I would never be able to do this on my own. I'm not brave enough. I'm not strong enough. But I did it. I look back and I say, how in the world did I do that? I honestly got to say it was divine. It was a divine encounter. If you don't have that yet, I want that so badly for you. I do. I want it so bad. And you can have it. And you can have it anytime. And I don't know what's holding you back. You've said a lot of things that basically say, I'm ready, but you're not ready, but you can be. And that's me. That was me. I was not ready until I was. And a friend said, what are you waiting for? And I said to myself, I don't know, nothing. And then I did it. And like I said, felt a little sick and then felt a lot of joy. So I would just encourage you. It's worth it.
What did you do? Abdu? How did you take that step?
Well, like I said, I was with my best friend, and we were in his basement, and the woman who had become my wife, she wasn't my wife yet. She was upstairs with her best friend, my best friend's wife. And they were doing whatever they were doing. I have no idea. We were just talking about things, and I was talking about how amazing this message was, and how different and fresh the message of grace was. And I said, I read Romans 5:8 recently, and it was so amazing that God demonstrates his love for us, and that while we were sinners, those who hate him, Christ died for us. The sacrificial love, my goodness. And I went on about it, and he's like, so wait, do you believe this? And I said, I think I've intellectually believed this for a long time, but I don't know if I'm willing to give everything to it. And that's when he basically said, what are you waiting for? And I said, you know what? I've got no good reason. There's no good reason. I have reasons. None of them are good. And I said, let's do this. So we called Nicole, my wife, who wasn't my wife at the time, but she came downstairs, and Kate, my best friend's wife, came downstairs, and we sat in a little circle of four, and I prayed, and I confessed with my mouth that Jesus is Lord, and I believed in my heart that God raised him from the dead. And that was that. That's all it took. And I knew after the nausea wore off, didn't take that long, I knew that I had eternal life. I knew it. I was like, oh my goodness, what news is better than this news? And I did keep it quiet for a short time. I didn't know how to tell people. I didn't know how to react. I didn't know how they would react. I didn't know if I would blow it, if I had a chance to give a credible answer to what happened, if I would blow it. So I kept it quiet until circumstances yielded themselves to the time when I could say something. But that's what I did. You just do it. You just plunge. It's just like when you're sitting there and there's this water. Everyone wants the cold plunge lately. I think they call it a Danish cold plunge around here. You stand in front of that icy water and you're thinking to yourself, no way, And then you just do it. You find yourself in the air and you're like, I'm in the air, and that water's coming, and then you're in it, and suddenly you're like, I'm in it. Oh my goodness, I'm in it, and I didn't die. Look at that. And now, and you get out and you feel invigorated. That's a lot like what it's like. Yeah. You just, at some point you got to do it. At some point, and it sounds, Signe, like you're really, really like far. So anyway, I would just encourage you to inch yourself towards it. I don't want to pressure you or anything like that. I'm just telling you. I see it in your heart. I see it in your eyes, and I hear it in your voice. Anyway, I'll stop there. I don't need to go further, but I'd love to, but I don't have to.
Signe, I'll give you the chance to respond any way you want to what he just said.
Well, I was actually thinking, Noelle, this enough about me. It's about you, this podcast. So, what do you think?
I don't know, just kind of yeah, I also encourage you to I don't know, go with your gut, go with your heart. If you, I don't know, find that Christianity like isn't for you or is for you, I think that's your decision. So yeah, I don't know. Good luck is all I can say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Noelle, do you have any final questions for Abdu?
Ooh, I don't know about questions. I just love the way you speak about things. It's just wonderful. And you said this a while ago, but I really, really like how you just briefly mentioned that Jesus wasn't white. 'Cause he wasn't. So that's it. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I was just going to say, if I, all of us, we come to these things with various backgrounds, baggages, biases, and hopes, and questions and cynicism. I just want to say, as time runs out here, I want to thank both of you, or all of you really, but Noelle, you and Signe, as we wrestled through some important topics. You guys are both in a situation where the time wasn't just available and you jumped in. And I want to thank you very much for the gift of that time. That's one thing we're not getting back. I can make more money. I can eat more food. I can make more relationships. I can't make more time. And you gave it to me, and you allowed me to take up some of yours. So you honored me very much with that. It's a gift I do not take lightly. So thank you.
Thank you. Again, just you're
thank
great.
Final two questions here, Abdu.
Okay.
We're wrapping up these episodes for for Noelle. This may very well be the last one where we have a guest on. I think I might record a special one of just maybe a summary of what we've talked about, maybe a love letter to you, Noelle. But something that Noelle said in our first conversation that just keeps kind of haunting me a little bit, and something that I've kept coming back to with different guests. She said she remembered as a kid going to church and hearing the message that if you don't behave, you'll go to hell, but she couldn't remember the gospel message. In case she or her friends are rewatching this, and because this will be one of the last episodes dedicated to her, and also because Signe's here, and because the gospel changes everything, would you mind sharing the gospel with whoever's watching this or listening to it later?
Yeah. Gospel means good news, and the things you heard, Noelle, are very much not good news. It can't possibly be good news if you're left to, you got to fix it. You got to do all the right things. You got to be good. You've got to be perfect. I don't see anything newsworthy in that. It's same old, nor do I see anything good about it in terms of its being exciting. C.S. Lewis in the Screw Tape Letters has the junior demon being taught by a master demon about how to distract people away from God. And he says, play on their horror of the same old thing. Have them think that Christianity is this dusty old thing that sounds just like everything else, and try to entice them with that which is exotic and new sounding, because people love the new and the exotic. Um, what I would say about the gospel is that it's not the same old thing. It's so different. Um, in every system of belief, there is the cycle of karma, where you have to work off your karma to achieve enlightenment. Whether it's moksha and release from the cycle of samsara in Hinduism, or it's nirvana when you attain that in Buddhism, which is essentially nothingness, but you have to do it yourself. You have to be good, the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, all these things in Buddhism, the way of yoga, the way of devotion, the way of chanting, whatever it is in Hinduism. In Islam, it's good deeds. If your good deeds outweigh your bad deeds, you go to heaven. In various forms of legalistic Christianity, as long as you're really good, you're going to get to go to heaven. Even in naturalism, even atheism would tell you that it's all about how good of a person you are in this life. And then if we're all really good and we all distribute the wealth, and if we all increase the resources, we'll have a utopian Star Trek-like society. It all depends on us. We're always the solution. The Christian faith teaches us that the good news is only good in light of the bad, and its goodness is highlighted in light of the bad. The bad is that we can't be the solution because we are the problem, but we are also fearfully and wonderfully made, and therefore God says, I'm not leaving you to that. And you don't have to prove your goodness to me. You don't have to prove your worth to me. I already know it doesn't measure up because I'm perfect and you can't possibly be. But I've sent my son. I've sent my son into the world who can live a perfect life because he is God incarnate. And he doesn't have any debts of his own to pay. He has an infinite riches and resources to pay your and my debts for me. And for us. And so because he has no debts of his own to pay, out of his boundless love, he pays a debt that I can't afford to pay to give me a heaven that I don't deserve, to spend an eternity with him that I can't even fathom. That's good news. You have to do it yourself? No way. How can that be good news? I remember, and I talk about this in my book, I saw a video of these two young ladies who had deconverted from Christianity. And they had said this statement, that life is so good now without Christianity. And they were both beaming about it. And the one said, now I'm free to just shine. I can just shine. And I remember thinking to myself, okay, I hear you. But here's the thing about that. This world demands things of you. If it's not God who demands good works from you, this world will demand it. It'll demand beauty. It'll demand handsomeness. It'll demand athleticism. It'll demand conformity. It'll demand intelligence. It'll demand achievement. It'll demand right think, or whatever it is that the new thing that society demands from you. And so the freedom to shine without God becomes the obligation to shine. And so it's the same trap. Do good things and you'll go to whatever version of heaven you might have. It's the Christian faith that says you don't have an obligation to shine. You already have God's image inside of you. You're made in God's image, and it's just dormant. It's marred. It's something we've done to it, but Jesus is the one who rekindles it. And so the obligation to shine in a secular view, in a religious view, becomes the ability to shine in the Christian view, because it's not you who shines, but Christ in you who shines, and you shine all the brighter because you are who you were meant to be. That's good news. Everything else is just you trying hard to be something you can't be. But the gospel message is God doing everything to make you into who you were supposed to be.
Okay, final question. If people want to find you later, Abdu, they can go to embracethetruth.org. Is that right?
That's right. We have
Okay.
we have a read, listen, and watch page there. You can look at our YouTube stuff and various things that way too. Yeah.
Okay. And you still speak all over the world talking about some of these different issues, and you're writing books. And if people want to know how they can support your ministry, where can they find out information on that?
Yeah, if you just go to the page, YouTube, embracethetruth.org, you'll see a support, make a donation page in Canada and the U.S. We are supported in terms of where we go. We go tough places. We go to places we thought we could not go, to say things we thought we could not say to people we thought would never listen, but they are listening, and the support is very much appreciated.
Yeah. All right. The final question of the Finding Something Real podcast, it's usually the same. It's about a journey towards restoration, eternity, authenticity, and love. REAL is an acronym for those 4 things: restoration, eternity, authenticity, and love. Which of those things stands out to you the most in your life right now, Abdu, and why?
My goodness. Every time you ask me that, I hope I try something different, because that's part of the evolution of the Christian journey, of the human journey, really. But the Christian journey is to find some area of life that is speaking to you at that moment. And I'd say that it's love right now. Authenticity is a big part of it, but it really is the sense of love. What does it mean for me to love well? Where do I recognize where I haven't? How do I rectify where I need to do it better? And how do I receive it? Receiving love is actually almost as hard sometimes as giving it.
Amen. Well, Abdu Murray, thank you so much for being here. Noelle, thank you so much for being here. I just love you. I'm so grateful. You and I are going to record a Patreon episode, I know, and maybe next week. But for people watching this may be the last episode where you're on the screen. And I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming on and sharing your worldview, your questions, your perspective, and being so engaged in these conversations. I can't wait to hear more about what this experience has been like for you as we record that future episode. But do you have any final things that you want to share briefly here?
Oh, you might not like it, but I'm still agnostic.
Well, I don't think the whole point of this was to
Right.
suddenly convert you. Yeah. It's all right. Don't expect me to grab you and try to force you to change your mind. That's not going to happen. Signe, how about you? Any final thoughts?
No, not right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Until next time.